speaking of Apple and getting into some news to finish off this episode of the podcast. So apparently, when Apple released the new iPad Pro with that M4 chip in there, right before the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 news came out. Oh no, excuse me, the Snapdragon X Elite CPUs were announced and released. Apple slid in there real quick and released an iPad with the M4 chip in it, right? And I think they did that on purpose to kind of they didn't want anybody to have a leg up and say they have the best mobile CPU. Well, the M4 technically is the most powerful, quote-unquote, best mobile CPU you can get, right? The Apple M4 chip. And they released that in the iPad Pro, which you can buy now. However, we all knew down the line that they were, and we did report on it, that Apple was planning on putting these new M4 chips in MacBook Pros, or I think all MacBooks in the future. Mac Mini, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, everything on the PC side. But we just didn't know when. Well, apparently, we know now a better time frame of when they're going to release this, and it seems like it might just be right around the corner. So there is a new leak, social media, from a rather solid leak, right? That said, the new the M4 MacBook Pro is going to start off at 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is huge because they've traditionally, I think, always base model was like 8 gigs of RAM. So these new M4 MacBooks or Mac Minis or MacBook Air, whatever, are all going to have 16 gigs of RAM base. Now, RAM on a Mac, for whatever reason, I may dive into it a little more in the future. It seems like 8 gigs of RAM on a MacBook is the equivalent to 16 gigs of RAM on a Windows laptop, right? So 16 gigs of RAM on a MacBook is generally the equivalent to 32 gigs of RAM on a Windows laptop. And that just has to do with how they process the memory, right? It's this new MacBook Pro with the new M4 CPU, again, 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. All Macs are M4 Macs are going to start with 16 gigs of RAM. So that's good news. They finally see the light and take the step up in RAM. So additionally, this packaging claims that the base model M4 MacBook will have a 10-core CPU and 10-core GPU. Prior reports suggested the M3 chip currently has an 8-core CPU and 10-core GPU, right? Another interesting detail about this new MacBook with the M4 is that the model will have three Thunderbolt 4 ports, unlike the current M3 MacBook Pros that only have 2 Thunderbolt ports. So that's good news, right? You see how he blocked his serial number on there? You see that picture? Very smart. Somebody could lock it. Now, when will this be released? Well, I found information that says, where are we? It's going to be released. Here we go. So the MacBooks, the new MacBooks with the M4 CPU, is going to be released alongside an iPad Mini 7, as well as a Mac Mini in October. So apparently there is a new Apple event, a virtual event. So it's not going to be a launch event like for the iPhone. It'll be, probably on Apple's YouTube channel on Monday, October 30th. So basically a month from now, 4 weeks from now, 30 days, whatever, Apple's going to announce a new MacBook Pro, new iMac models, a Mac Mini, and an iPad Mini 7. Now it says iMac models with the new M3 series of chips. So it looks like the M4 series of chips are only going to go to the Pro models. They're obviously not going to put an M4 chip in an iPad Mini 7. I think that's going to have, I don't know what that's going to have in it. Probably their mobile, the A18 Pro. But all MacBooks, all the Pro variants are getting the M4 chips, and that will be in late October, day before Halloween. So in the Power On newsletter earlier this month, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman said that Apple will hold an October event this year to announce iPads, including the new updated iPad Mini. No more home button. So you remember with the iPhone SE, the new SE4, that they might announce at this event, no? Anyways, it's not the old SE where it's got the old traditional looking style. It has the physical home button. No. Apple's going to make a new iPhone SE that looks like an iPhone 16, just a little smaller, right? It's going to have that dynamic island and all that. They're also doing that to these new iPad minis. So the minis was a traditionally old school looking iPad with the physical home button. This year they're revamping that. It's going to look like an iPad Air, just smaller, right? Which is, it's time to update that design language. Those look, now they look really outdated. Let's get into what they're releasing. So I mentioned already the MacBook Pro. It's going to have that new M4 chip. I've never used an iPhone. I take that back. I have used an iPhone. I've never used a MacBook. I don't know if I ever will, right? I really don't have any interest. Honestly, never, but I'm sure I will at some point. There you get the iMac. Now, this one says it's coming with the M4 chip, so maybe they're going to release two models, one with an M3 and one with an M4. What is this? Mac Mini, M4. So you can tell they're throwing in all their premium devices. They're going to throw in their premium CPU in their premium devices. And I'm sure the iPad Mini 7 is probably going to get the A18 Pro, which you see in the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max. Now, we got those coming out in late October. And there's one last thing I want to get to that's in development that we can make a note of. So these M4s, these M4 CPUs are about to go mainstream, right? Well, guess what? Its successor, the M5 CPU, is already planned and is already in testing. And guess what that is going to release on? Yes, the Apple Vision Pro 2. That's correct. So Apple is testing in the testing phase of the Apple Vision Pro 2. It's actually entering mass production. So they're actually at the end stages of testing. And they're in between of testing and actually mass producing it, like actually starting the manufacturing plant to start pumping these out. Now, it's set for release in 2025. So I'm assuming it's in quarter 2, 2025, or in the second half of 2025, somewhere right at the late second quarter, early first half. So you're looking at like what, May or June of next year, 2025, they're going to release these Apple Vision Pros. It's going to have the all-new M5 CPU, spatial computing, and generative AI. We'll see if they improve upon any of the big disappointments that basically came about with these Apple Vision Pro first gen, because we all know, mad expensive, right? I think base model, I think it was $3,500, but after taxes, you're looking at like $4,200. That's base, and you can't buy the base because the memory is too low. So you get the upgraded memory, you're looking at like $5,000. So they're super expensive. They're heavy. Most people, if you watch reviews, they say their necks hurt after wearing them for extended periods of time. And there's no apps for it. Now, Apple has some, but the app developers, Apple's in a big tug of war, and these app developers are getting fed up with Apple simply because of how much piece of the pie Apple's taking. I think it's 30-40% of every dollar, 30 to 40 cents of every dollar Apple gets that the developer earns from earnings in the Play Store, app sales, advertisements. Apple gets 30 to 40 cents of every dollar you earn. And there has just been a lack of app development, especially when it comes to this. So I think Apple's going to have to work with their developers to really make a special deal with these app developers just for the Apple Vision Pro 2 to get more apps on there, right? You can't have this super expensive device and only have 10, 15, 20 apps to use. You need to have a nice, robust app library to choose from, right? I would say probably at least 100 various things, right? But you got to have, when you're spending that much, and it's actually really cool, but it does have a couple of big flaws: price, weight, and then apps. So if they can get the price down a little bit, I'm not expecting them to, charge $1,000 this upcoming year, but you gotta, it's so freaking expensive. And they had trouble selling it, right? They cut production. They cut production in half because nobody was buying them. So if you can reduce cost a little bit, if you can reduce the weight, right? So people can use it for longer periods of time, and you can work some kind of deal out with these developers. Hey, instead of taking, maybe Apple will say, instead of taking 40% of your earnings, we'll do 20, right? Maybe they can work something out. I don't know if it'd be a across the board or it's a per developer negotiation, but they got to do something. It's pretty embarrassing, in fact. But that is, testing phase has gone pretty good, it appears, because they would not mass produce it if the testing did not go well. And it looks like we're going to they're going to start producing these and again launch these, looking probably at the moment between May and June 2025. So you will have an upcoming Vision Pro 2 with the all-new M5 chipset. Lord, man, that's going to be a beast of a CPU. Now, let's see, is that going to be on the 3 nanometer or 2 nanometer TSMC? Okay, so the A19, next year's flagship CPU for iPhone 17, the A19 and A19 Pro CPU will be mass produced on the improved 3 nanometer node. So they're not switching to 2 nanometer just quite yet. And it looks like the M5 will be produced on the 3 nanometer node. Looking forward to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 OnePlus 13. And cannot wait to test those out. So that'll do it, folks. Thank you for joining me. Again, if you have any questions whatsoever on checking IMEIs, buying and selling phones, if you need any advice, if you got any questions, hit me up in these comments, or you can DM me or email me, what have you. Now, I'm going to end this right now, but if you need the links to the sites that you go check your device on, come back to this video. What time is it? Give me about 5 minutes and I'll come back to this video and I'll have the links put in there so you can start checking devices. So if you got any questions, give me a holler, and come to the description of this video in a few minutes and I'll have everything linked down there for you. So appreciate it. Thank you for joining me on this Sunday afternoon, September 29th, and I will see you tomorrow. Please be safe. Have an enjoyable but safe rest of your Sunday evening. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. I'll have everything in the links in just a second. Peace.